Hello, everyone. Welcome to our latest Author Insight podcast. Today, we are honored to host scholar Mads Rašković from the Auckland University of Technology, Heinrich Voss from University of Bristol, and Brent Burmester from University of Auckland for an insightful discussion on modern slavery, featuring from practical solutions, ethical innovations, and sustainability, as recently published in Critical Perspective on International Business. We hope you find the conversation enlightening. First, let the author introduce themselves before we dive into the discussions. Mads, let's go ahead.
Thank you, Ha. Kia ora koutou katoa. Hi, everyone. My name is Mads Rašković, and it's really a pleasure to be able to share my ideas in a dialogue with two prominent IB scholars. I've really enjoyed this process. So the original idea for taming wicked problems through IB policy really came about out of, I wouldn't say frustration, but agitation. So there have been papers published on modern slavery, calling it a phenomenon in search of a theory. Karuna and colleagues have even called it a non-field, and that really resonated with me. How can such a pressing issue that is so pervasive in global value chains be referred to as a non-field or just as a phenomenon that lacks any kind of sound theoretical background? The other point of theoretical agitation came from my own work on wicked problems, where I realized that there's kind of two different parallel universes. A lot of IB scholars use the term grand challenges, which was popularized by the paper authored by Buckley, Doe, and Benicia in 2017. And while it's a very captivating concept that's become quite popular, my own experience with that concept is that it doesn't really provide enough theoretical toolkits and backgrounds for us to really address these problems. So this is where the initial idea came about. And before I kind of handed it over to Heinrich and Brent, who really opened my eyes to aspects of the phenomena that I haven't really thought about, right? I was so captivated by wicked problems that I kind of forgot about the seminal literature on multinational enterprise control and coordination mechanisms, and particularly Brent's point on the global multi-level governance nexus. I would just like to kind of, define for those of you that might not be familiar with what wicked problems are, right? So wicked problems are problems that resist both formulation as well as an optimal solution. They are both complex and complicated problems that usually arise at the interface of global society, economy, and policy. And while they cannot be optimally solved, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't engage with them, right? So there are ways of kind of mitigating their consequences, taming them, and trying to constantly resolve them. I will stop here and I will hand it over to Heinrich to kind of bring the M&E control and coordination lens. Heinrich, over to you.
Well, thanks very much, Matt, and thanks very much indeed for writing this paper in the first instance. It was a pleasure to engage with your thoughts and discussions around wicked problems in IB policy and how we can address the issues, or help addressing the issues from an IB's perspective. Miguel Dindial from University of Leeds and me kind of worked on this issue, taking, as you said, an M&E's control ownership lens to probe some of the aspects you addressed there. But before I go into a somewhat more depth into that question, I want to provide a bit more kind of context about what we're talking about and why this is a wicked problem, as you indicated. And just as a way to illustrate the context we talk about, the US Department for Labor, for example, is publishing or has published an app called Sweat and Toil, in which they're indicating in which countries what kind of commodities are under threat from modern slavery type labor exploitations. And the range of commodities ranges from the in inverted commas, typical suspects of fashion, cotton industries, all the way to solar panels and lithium batteries. It's a wide range of different commodities we have to consider where such kind of modern slavery exploitative practices can take place, which addresses or highlights one of the issues around the kind of global value change we might have to in mind and have to bear in mind when we talk about those issues. Because the solar panel value chain looks very different to one in bananas, looks very different to one in the fashions, and the kind of opaqueness and untransparency we see across them are making kind of uniform policy approaches quite difficult to bring about. And the work we have done, or I've been involved in separately from this particular contribution here on the UK Modern Slavery Act, highlighted this quite nicely to say it's really difficult to have a one-fits-all solution. But what I think comes across nicely in the legislation, and one of the points we want to address in this paper here, is questioning this point of the extent to which we assume in IB, but also in policy making, that the MNE has overarching control and power of influencing the whole GVC. And it can just cascade through the GVC compliance around labour standards because of its economic might, and it just runs it through. Just to highlight one of the data we've put into the paper, there's a recent survey by Deloitte around which they've conducted with global procurement managers, and only 50% of them are certain that they have high visibility on who's their tier one supplier. I mean, if this is not already kind of raising alarm bells, then to say that 90% don't know who is supplying them anywhere beyond tier one indicates quite clearly the challenges we are facing by having multinationals being taken or holding account to address modern slavery issues and wickedness around modern slavery. And we need to bring in a broader realm of stakeholders to address some of the issues here. I'll leave it here for the moment. Happy to engage in further discussions on those issues, and passing on to Brent for further comment.
Well, thank you, Heinrich. Yeah, I'm at the University of Auckland. I'm with a small centre that focuses on modern slavery as an international business phenomenon, if you will. So it was really interesting to see Matt's take on modern slavery using the wicked problematization lens, because I think when you're dealing with any kind of sort of intransigent social issue like modern slavery, poverty, underdevelopment, whatever it might be, you're very aware of all the attributes of the problem that characterize wickedness. You understand how slippery it is, how people disagree on the way to deal with it, or how to define the issue, how different people want different sorts of solutions. So when you're inside that particular problem space, you know it very well. But I think what the wicked framing does, it reminds you, or it sort of carries you out of that space, and it alerts you to the fact that in other social problem issues, people are addressing exactly the same, their problems have the same characteristics, although you might not at first understand them to be part of the same family of issues. So that wicked framing, I think, is really intriguing, because it's not as if in reading Matt's characterization of wickedness, I thought, oh gosh, I'm learning something new about modern slavery. But what I saw instead was that modern slavery is a member of a larger species of issue, and that there are lessons therefore to be learned from the way that wickedness, in a sense, is allowed to frame and draw lessons out of those other spaces. So I thought that was really fascinating. My own interest in modern slavery really stems from the fact that my research is more about multinationals and the power they wield not so much through the marketplace or through transactions and GPCs and those kinds of relationships, but in the political space. So my role within the center really, or my participation in our little center really stems from my interest in how modern slavery not only can be addressed through the application of multinationals' influence and power in the political sense, but also to the extent that it might be perpetuated, one hesitates to say it, but not accidentally, in the way that multinationals construct their supply lines, and use distance as a means by which to create. And it's not just geographical distance, but it's psychic distance, as we say in IB. It's the differences in culture and capacity which enable multinationals to, if you like, characterize modern slavery with a sort of plausible deniability, so they can look surprised and look hurt that you might be suggesting that they have any part to play in perpetuating the problem. But everything that we learn about modern slavery in the context of global supply chains suggests that if it wasn't visible, it was findable if the effort is taken to find it. That sort of comes back to something that Harik points out there, that I believe procurement managers when they say that they don't really know what's going on, even at the first tier. But that may be strategically advantageous. So and that really comes back to this wickedness of the problem, that in order to solve it, and I think Matt's really right when he says it's kind of insoluble, because all forms of slavery have just proved extraordinarily difficult to eradicate. But in order to solve it, we really need all of the governing actors to sincerely want to solve it. And I think as long as those with significant power in the if you like, in that constellation of governance are not wholly committed to its eradication, then you've got another element of wickedness. It's something I sort of allude to in the paper, the idea that governing actors themselves are a little bit wicked. And I know that wickedness is not used in that context when we use that problematization lens, but there is another, if you like, there's another kind of wickedness at work when we address issues like modern slavery, and I wonder to the extent to which wicked problematization confronts that. I'd be really interested to see, to what extent it engages with the idea that there is potentially a lack of sincerity in ostensible efforts to solve these kinds of problems.
So if I can just pick up on a couple of points, and maybe I'll start with Heinrich. It wasn't my initial idea to kind of open up the Pandora box of M&E control and coordination mechanisms, and luckily, when his response paper came out, I went into the literature and I found this absolutely fantastic state-of-the-art literature review published in JIPS on M&E control and coordination mechanisms by Zheng and co-authors. I think it's 2023, if I'm not mistaken. And what was really interesting in that state-of-the-art literature review is that it actually made a strong case against all the opacity, against all the, the dispersion, the vagueness, the fuzziness, the complexity, and the complicatedness. The bottom line from that literature review, unless I completely misunderstood it, was that M&Es still remain lead actors in these processes, and that sometimes their role is even more important and more relevant in these opaque and highly dispersed global value chains. And, you know, to kind of link to what Brent was saying, and I went back to Brent's 2019 paper in Critical Perspectives on International Business, where he and his authors really introduced this idea of a global multi-level governance nexus. And in the end, I kind of said that MNEs are not just lead actors, but they're lead governors, right? And I didn't coin the term. The term was coined by Brent. So I think at the end, by probing theoretically into modern slavery, we can also, as IB scholars, gain perhaps new perspectives, some new ideas, perhaps even a novel insight on age-old discussions around control and coordination mechanisms in global value chains, around global multilateral governance and these sort of issues. And because of the nature of modern slavery, I think by IB scholars looking at modern slavery and trying to link it with how multinational enterprises function, how global value chains function, we can in turn also help advance our own discipline and our own theoretical discussions around control, coordination, and governance within international business.
Thank you, Matt, Heinrich, and Brent for a very insightful conversation. I believe audience like me learn a lot and also enjoy the discussion about modern slavery, wicked problem, the power or the leading role of MNEs in global value chain, also even political issue. And thank you again for your effort and for your time for today. And we are looking forward to your quality subsequent submission to our journal. And goodbye for now. Thank you.